welcome to a special episode of Property Roundup here on iPropertyRadio with myself, Carol Tallon. I'm delighted to be joined by my co-host, Emmet Creighton, Client Partnership Director with Daft.ie, and today we're coming to you from the offices of P.N. O'Gorman in New Ross with Anne Carton, Principal, and with Philip Carton, Auctioneer. So Anne and Philip, first of all, thank you so much for letting us into your office today. It is a beautiful day in New Ross, and there's so much happening in New Ross around public ground projects. It has changed a lot since the last time I was here in a few years. So tell me a little bit about the marketplace at the moment.
No.
Firstly, welcome to New Ross.
Thank
both
you.
It's great to have you here. Big fans of the show and sharing insights from all over the country. So you're great advocates for the industry. And New Ross, it really is a wonderful town to live in. And as you noted, the public realm, Wexford County Council, through their initiatives, are really, taking advantage of the natural river which flows through the town. A lovely boardwalk has opened from the bridge, which is just outside the office window, running over past the Dumbrody Famine Ship, which is a visitor attraction, bringing now close to 80,000 visitors to New Ross annually, up from the COVID slump, but it's a phenomenal attraction. And then further out of town, you've got the Kennedy Homestead, so long live the Kennedys.
Well, it's fantastic. When we drove into the town today, I was remarking, because I'm from West Wicklow originally, so we would have spent time in New Ross, and I haven't been here for a while, but I have had the opportunity to visit the Dumbrody. But we have a young intern, Ben, working with us today, and as he was driving past, he said, "Oh wow," because he'd never been in New Ross. And so actually, when we're finished recording today, we're going straight down to the Dumbrody.
We'll take you there.
So we're inviting the next generation to explore the history and bring the history to life. But I feel like we're in some way bringing the history to life just by being here today. So Anne, you might just give us a little bit of history about the firm.
About the firm, right. Well, we could be here a long time if I give you all the history. We have just celebrated in the last couple of weeks our 100th anniversary. Now, P.N. O'Gorman is probably older. We think it was probably maybe 1910, 1915. But we have evidence where P.N. O'Gorman became a member of the Irish Auctioneers and Valuers Institute. We have it on our wall here in March 1924. So P.N. ran what would be called a mixed practice. It was land, it was houses, public houses. We have copies of all the adverts. He would have rented land, but he also would have had a pub, furniture sales rooms, and he didn't own the Undertakers. They were another firm next door. But then in 1947, my mother started to work there as, we'll say, now it would be an administrative assistant, a secretary. And 6 weeks later, my father joined as an apprentice auctioneer. Apparently, P.N. O'Gorman had a good friend, Dennis Hennessy, who had worked with my grandfather, and they thought my father would be suited to the job. They thought he'd be suited. Little did they know they were dead right. So the two of them worked together in P.N. O'Gorman's, and one thing led to another. P.N. died in the late 1940s, and they continued working for Elizabeth O'Gorman, his wife. And at this stage, my father was very keen on livestock. He always was. And in the early 50s, they started looking at providing a cattle sales, a cattle mart for New Ross. So we were based in Ross Birkin at the time, and they started to build pens in the yard where the furniture was sold on a Friday, and on a Tuesday they set up sheep pens. So by 1952, my parents had taken over the business, and they got married in 1952, and the cattle sales started. So it went from there.
Well, I was describing it as a family business, but really it's a business family. Then
yes,
Yeah.
it is.
And it still remains a family business.
very
It's
much.
still, yes.
And is it just the both of you, or is there other family members involved?
Well, everyone is a property expert at the kitchen table,
Okay,
but
yeah.
in the business there's the two of us, and we then have a great team of Mary Nolan, who looks after all our accounts and keeps us all in order, and Anna Gallivan, who's our office manager. And this year, last September last year, we've taken on an apprentice, Jean Brennan. So.
And Mary has been with you for almost 50 years, so she can be regarded
She
as family.
started-
Yes.
She started
a lot
as a
of families
child.
aren't together that long.
She is family.
She's very
family,
much
yeah.
everyone's family.
Everyone.
And it's not continuous 50
It's a
years.
it's a common trait that we see in property. Property remains a family business and always remains a family business. Once you're in property, it's very difficult to get out of property. So you must have seen the evolution of New Ross and your own business over the last, well, you guys aren't here 100 years, but over the 100 years, and I see memorabilia around the place. How has the business changed from, and I see P&O Gorman here selling eggs and butter after the 1916 rising, and then your own family's selling cattle. Do you guys being the busiest agent in New Ross, according to the Daft data?
That sounds great.
Yeah.
But just to give you an idea, I mean, my memory of the business goes back to when I was about 4 or 5. And all I ever wanted to do was be in a cattle mart, realistically, which I was from about the age of 10. Now, I became an auctioneer, went to Dublin to train. It wasn't perceived in 1972 that it was a business really for female. But I went to Dublin, I trained in the original Fitzgerald and Partners in Marion Row, and Dennis Bergen, Alexis Fitzgerald, John DeVere White, Barry Smith. We had a fantastic training in all the elements of the business. I went to Rathmines, College of Commerce, where we did our courses, but actually my whole plan would have been all the time to come back home. At that stage, my father was still in the cattle mart, but we had moved to our present offices in 1969 when the new bridge opened. So obviously we would have become more involved in residential property as well, some commercial. New Ross at one stage had over 80 pubs.
Wow.
So there was always a pub for sale,
Yeah.
a hardware and a pub. But every premises on the 2 main streets had 7-day licenses.
Oh.
Every premises. So they changed even then. I came back in 79, early 1979, and the plan was I was going to help. And I remember coming home the first week, and I had my Tom's directory, and I had my Parry's valuation tables, and my father looked at me and he said, "Parry's valuation tables, you won't need those." But they're still there. But unfortunately, in September 79, my father suffered a heart attack and died suddenly. So it was a case of my mother and myself saying, right, we open the doors and we keep going, which we did. And I have to say, I rented land, I sold railway sleepers, I sold cattle, trees. But then we started to develop, there was always the houses. The first housing estate was built in New Ross, would have been by the ESB, because we had a very big power station here and the Great Island, and they had a few surplus houses, and we sold 8 of them in 1974, but then there was, the 80s were tough. The 80s were incredibly tough. I remember many days sitting here wondering how...
You're forgetting a very big component, which I think has been consistent throughout the practice, from PN to Nana and Grandad, land.
Oh, yes.
And whether it was, a combination of land sales or land lettings, that would be a very strong component and part of the business. So
Well, you see, I
would
told
that
you.
have been a little less subject to cycles?
The land, interestingly enough, the land letting, which is still a huge part of our business, the land letting, I remember about 2 weeks after my poor father died, my first land letting. Mary, who's with us still, and I headed off because that time you did them annually in the farmyard. And this was a baptism of fire for the 85-year-old owner. He looked, and he had the whiskey, and he had all the drink lined up to bring in all the farmers. And he said to me, "Would you like whiskey?" And he handed Mary a bar of chocolate.
So we shouldn't laugh, but that really just shows that actually, we always think about the evolution and more women coming into the business. We see it from the agency perspective. I suppose we probably don't think about it from the consumers, particularly those farmers who didn't understand what it was like to have female valuers coming through this side.
These were bachelor farmers, but I have to make the point, and I have said it any time I've ever talked about all this, because I did it for the farming programme on Wexford Radio a few years ago. The first people who actually accepted me without question were the farmers.
Really? You just got the job done?
They just said, "That's grand, whatever you think."
Yeah.
And they still do. Right. They still do.
Coming from a farming background, I think farmers are very straight to deal with. You either get the job done or you don't. Relationships are great, but those relationships are built on trust and performance.
Very much.
So in New Ross, P&O Gorman has been established here over 100 years, I think we can fair to say.
Yes.
What was the competition like with other auctioneers, valuers, and were there any other females in New Ross doing this business?
My mother was not a qualified auctioneer, but she could give as good as anybody. She was here for 63 years until her death in January 2010. But no, we had 3 other auctioneering firms. One would have been a contemporary of my father's, who I had a great working relationship with. When he died, actually, I took over his land letting book for his daughters. At the time, they weren't involved in the business. And then we had another firm who would have been houses, primarily it was an insurance company. They're now gone. But we've other, like every small town, during the perceived boom of the 2000s up to 2008, there would have been firms would have opened. And I think Philip will talk a little more about 2000s when all the new houses were built in New Ross, because this was something unknown. We had never seen this before. No houses had been built in New Ross since the local authority and the ESB for maybe 30 years. And in 1998, one of Wexford's very large builders at the time, Pat Neville, came to New Ross, bought a field from me and built 36 new houses. And Philip will take it off.
And then from that, 98, almost a 10-year period, New Ross witnessed a transformation it probably hadn't seen since the 60s with Ross Company, Albatross and Stafford's. There was close to 900 housing units built over that 10-year period. Plus, we estimate about 320 Section 23 apartments. So this really was a new gold rush for New Ross, and it was interesting when we were looking back at some of the figures. That evolution from the late 90s, the buyers of a 3-bed semi were owner-occupiers. So this would have been a first home, or it would be somebody moving out of an older townhouse to a new home with an ensuite. And by the end, or coming close to the end of that boom cycle, we had a development for Pat called Brooklawn, 116 houses, mix of 2-3 bed townhouses and semis. And we estimate there was about 90% of the buyers there were investors.
But that's a huge change on the dynamic of the town.
Huge. But that was also riding on the positive migration into the town as well. So there's a lot of local employers, and we saw a huge number coming in from Eastern Europe, a very large Polish community, Lithuanian, and they were ready to rent. And now what we're seeing is, which we'll probably touch on later in terms of market dynamics, those houses being sold by the same investors because we have come out of negative equity, and they're being bought by either the tenants or people who are looking to secure.
Oh, well then that's a really good news story, because when you touched on not just the volume of homes coming in, but actually the Section 23 apartments, particularly because I suppose my my memory of New Ross would have been coming down here as a bargain hunter in the aftermath of the crash, and I would say that there are definitely towns that suffered more of a decline than others, and New Ross would have been one of those that I would have identified.
From a numbers perspective, you look at a Section 23 apartment, there's a number of developments, but you would have seen at the bottom, a 1 or a 2 bed unit at about 30,000 in a distressed auction. We're now back up to 80 to 100, and a 2 bed you can be transacting at 120 right up to 185. But what's really, really interesting and encouraging from the moorings, which you can just see out the window, it's a large scale development over 100 units, 1 and 2 beds, that some of the buyers there now are first time buyers. And I have met a very clever first time buyer who is, I think, 19 or 20. He's in his apprenticeship, he's got his mortgage sorted out, and he's going to rent a room.
I think our producer will be abandoning ship, and because she's house hunting at the moment. And as we were driving down, I said, "Have you looked at New Ross?" And there are a number of really interesting properties.
There is great value, and at that price point, you're getting 60 square meters of bright contemporary living accommodation, well managed blocks. I think that is a credit to some of the developers who did keep skin in the game in the management of them, that they are well run resident caretakers. And some of the other apartment developments that we have, we're seeing then those would have transacted at 40 to 60 in the slump. They're now coming up to 180,000, and they're being bought by owner-occupiers, which is brilliant.
Whenever I come into a new market, I'm always really interested to know who's buying, like what are the dynamics. I want to know a little more about your sellers, but sometimes we make assumptions about the buyers based on what's happening locally in terms of market prices, or maybe in terms of mortgage activity. But actually, when you tell me a story like that, I'm thinking that is very savvy. That's very like the behaviour we saw after the crash as well. And that's what we love to see. So actually, break down a little more maybe the dynamics of the buyers that you're seeing at the moment.
So the buyers that we're seeing at the moment are falling into a number of very distinct categories. And there is a huge activity from first-time buyers, and they're primarily coming in through your platform of Daft, which is a great tool, and looking at the visitors, first-time buyers, and the nice part is seeing mortgage approved or cash coming from their mortgage approved. But they would be the majority at the moment, probably taking up over 40% of buyer profile. They're coming in with loan approval from anywhere from 150,000 as a single to a joint couple at about 300,000. Have noticed a fallback in their purchasing power with interest rate rises that you would have had probably purchasing power plus 350. Now that's back at 300. The next pool of buyers would be movers, and this would be somebody who, if you want to use the right size, going from a 3-bed, 4-bed semi, wanting room for kids, wanting gardens, and the converse of people wanting to future-proof, get a house in the town, downstairs bedrooms, looking at energy efficiency, and so that will be another big segment. Investors, not so much.
That's a consistent story we're seeing right around the country, but I suppose buyers are only one half of the equation.
And the sellers. But we're very lucky to have another very nice category, which is in the coastal areas that we cover in southwest County Wexford, going down to Duncannon, Featherton, the Hook Peninsula, that we are seeing a lot of second home buyers down there, or looking at people who are able to get that work-life balance just right and be based down in the sunny southeast and work remotely and get back to Dublin for 2 or 3 days.
Well, actually, you've touched on a trend then that I was genuinely curious about before we came down today, and that is what impact COVID has had, because I'm biased. The southeast is so beautiful. Well, actually, it's not just I'm biased. It has the highest recorded number of days of sunshine in Ireland.
Maybe not
It
this
used
summer.
to have, Carol. I don't know where it's gone.
So it has always been a real destination for people. I can remember our first holiday destination would have been mobile home in Duncannon for sure. A little before my time, I can barely remember it, but I that would have been one of the first spots that Farmers and Wicklow would migrate to for a week or two in the summer because it was close enough to come back into the evening and morning.
If you needed to.
So those are the priorities. But since COVID, actually, the people who were buying what might have traditionally presented as holiday homes, are they second home buyers, or are they actually people who now have the freedom to choose where they live? Are they remote workers?
We've been talking about this, and it is always interesting to understand both, your buyers, so you can be better informed for your sellers. Conceptually, COVID was a game changer in the market. One of the negatives has been the lack of stock. That if you look at the number of listings, and I think looking back on Daft, if you had 1,700 listings for the entire county Wexford pre-COVID, post-COVID you're down under 700 for the entire county, excluding new builds. Where COVID really proved a bonus, which was completely counterintuitive, were more families looking for coastal homes, so intergenerational use. And there was a pent-up saving or an inheritance, and we had a number of properties where we were doing open viewings, seeing 20-30 people come in.
We had queues
to come into properties in Duncannon.
It's what we're seeing as well. The COVID effect has taken a couple of years to manifest itself on the ground. Now, property is traditionally illiquid and it takes a little while, but also companies that have gone fully remote, it's taken a couple of years to wean themselves off a fixed location. Even our own business is now fully remote, and we had an office in Wexford, and now our staff work all over the country. That's taken a couple of years for people to get settled, for us to put the procedures in place, and you can see that around the country.
You can, but where we would have seen some changes, so we would have only had a handful of people who could really benefit from that remote working environment, but this gravitational pull back to the office, and for that younger cohort who bought, who were able to secure a house under 200,000 or under 250, are now being forced to ask themselves difficult questions. I have one couple who bought over 3.5 years ago.
Yes, immediately
after COVID. It was the dream to be by the coast. They both had flexibility. Now there is child number 2 on the way. There's 2 days in Dublin, and it's just not feasible because the infrastructure is not around you in terms of family for childcare. And now they're selling, and we've hopefully got that across the line for them. But I think the COVID bounce was more for families, parents buying with a view for their children to use, grandchildren to use, and that really witnessed probably on average, what would you say, like almost 20% increase in.
Oh, absolutely. People were arriving down, like say you said, Duncannon. Yeah. People who had holidays in Duncannon. Yeah. And they said, "Oh, this is perfect."
The nostalgia.
Nostalgia. And quite a few of them had inheritances, retirement packages, various reasons that they were actually, they had cash. And we sold some lovely houses in Duncannon, Featherton and the Hook. And they are now currently used by families.
Yeah.
And even at the moment, there's a girl who all her family have connections in Duncannon. She's just bought a lovely 2-bed from us down there, which when her son and daughter who live abroad come home, they'll have it. So that certainly kicked off and drove prices.
You've touched on something though that's really interesting that we haven't really explored, and it's a question that we have put to agents up and down the country. But we've been following the impacts of COVID, and I'm such an advocate for rural Ireland. It is utterly convincing to me that people would choose rural Ireland. But it's really interesting because actually what I'm hearing from the tale the story you're telling us here is that actually that connection with the area is still very important. Does Daft have any stats on that? Because it's pretty unsettled from employers' perspective still.
Yeah, and it's more anecdotal evidence. We're a data-driven business and we have a large data team, but it's a very difficult thing to kind of quantify and record. And it's through interactions with our clients, such as you guys, to say who's buying and importantly who's selling. Yeah. And we had this discussion before when we were down. You were talking about, say, people coming across from the UK to buy holiday homes. They tend to waste a little bit of time. They see it as a dream location. It's more local people that are driving to the manor.
Very, very much so. And every year we would look back and do an analysis of our buyers. And by and large, for the last several years, it's been about 70 to 80% with a connection either to the area, whether and what we're finding, what you're mentioning about Duncannon being very true, and Anne mentioned people coming back. They're now 50s, 60s, they have the capital to buy something there, but most of our market in New Ross is and surrounding area is locally driven.
It's similar to the data we collect on how people choose an estate agent to sell with. And if you go through the certain criteria, it's, do I know them? Have I used them before? Have a family and friend recommended them? Do I know their brand? Are they present online? Etc., etc., etc. And it all points in the one direction. If people know you from the area, they'll stay with you. And then that goes to the same when they're buying. Now you're getting a lot more, say, international people in Dublin, with John Kildare, looking at Wexford and New Ross in particular. And we can see that data. Because, like you said, Carol, they're looking for bargains, they're looking for something more remote. And it has become unaffordable in some places, close to Dublin. If we look at the average house price in Dublin, over €600,000.
And to use some anecdotes on that, so we had a beautiful house. It was a one bed. A client had renovated, her a tenant had moved out. It was about 50 square meters, open plan ground floor, nice kitchen, double bedroom, bathroom upstairs, close to the town park. One bed, directly out onto the street, and 98,000. And that it's only relatively recently, and on Daft. The phone's emails melted.
Oh yeah,
completely.
Just driven by value.
Yeah. To find something in the country under 100,000
and renovated,
yes.
ready to live in.
But generally what people do is if they don't know the area, they might be drawn by a low price, but they will still drive down, even maybe before scheduling a viewing. They'll still drive to an area to explore it. So this is definitely one that you drive to, and I think possibly what people might think is, oh, this is so much closer. Or this morning, we left Connemara this morning and we realised that we needed a vital piece of equipment. Straight on to Google, we thought we might have to divert up to Dublin and come down. No, everything we needed was in Kilkenny. And I was thinking, okay, is it an hour and a half from Kilkenny? 43 minutes from Kilkenny. So I think the accessibility will surprise people, apart from being delighted when they're driving through the town. The road infrastructure has improved so much over the past few decades.
Most definitely, and like when you look at the road infrastructure, but you also look at the town itself in terms of what it has to offer. There's 3 national schools, there's 5 secondary schools. Waterford City is maximum 20 minutes, and you're saying Kilkenny 43, Wexford about the same. And at the moment, we have a very nice house about 10 kilometres from New Ross, and have bidders, a couple who are relocating from Sandyford, and they're selling an apartment. If everything would go through, they'll be mortgage free, have kids in school here, and own a lovely four-bed home. It's a dream.
With small children and have to be debt free.
Yeah.
I mean, and here's an admission for this podcast. We've looked at it, myself and my wife. We've recently bought in Wicklow, and we're with her family are Wicklow. And we're like, Wexford's not that far away.
No.
Especially because my own family are from Kildare. And Kildare is closer, but it takes a lot longer to get to.
A totally different road system. No, but people, and the good thing is, towns like New Ross, particularly the secondary schools, which is obviously a huge issue with people. As Philip said, there are 5, and 2 of them are 800 pupils plus, because you see 3 of them are boarding schools way back in the day, and they've great sites, great campuses, plenty of space, and it really, really is wonderful that people can go and get places. But also the hinterland around New Ross, there's some superb national schools. I mean, really, really good national schools. And they're running all sorts of fundraisers. We have them Cushinstown, Rathborough Road, Hasty, and we had people 2 years ago And they were very interested in the fact that some of the schools are they have special units for autistic children.
Yeah.
It's so much.
The facilities
The
are there.
facilities are there.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well,
they are.
the facilities are there, but we're in an unusual situation now because Emmet has just made an admission that he might. I hope you don't come to regret that, but actually, Katie had the same conversation, our producer, on the way down. So
Yes.
actually, knowing that half the production team that are down here today
We'll have a
are
conversation.
potentially interested in the area. We know the buyer's range, or the buyer's range you said really is, up to 350 thereabouts. Are their expectations being met? Tell us a little bit about your sellers and what really can be achieved for that price.
Well, Philip now has been, as I said, dealing with a lot of the sellers because I've been out of action, having had 2 hip replacements recently. But our sellers, different categories, I suppose.
Can I just add something we spoke about as well? A lot of our sellers are generational.
Yes.
We have worked with grandparents. We're working with their grandchildren now. So, from that perspective,
It's something I wanted to kind of, and I knew we were getting there, but you guys have been around for so long. You're the largest agent in New Ross. How do you remain at the top? Like, how do you keep getting the people to come to sell with you? What are you doing here that's different? Why do they keep coming back?
It's personal, and we're invested. Recently, we took an exercise. We were upgrading our website and doing a small brand refresh and working with a copywriter. And we're going through this exercise of talking about the business and just giving some examples. And it was really as simple as, when you go shopping at the weekend, you're going to the supermarket, you're pushing your trolley around, you're going to meet 3, 4, 5 of your clients. And you do not want to have to dodge them. House is not sold, house is not sold. You want to have some good news, positive. So, it is based on, honesty, transparency, hard work. And, when we are working for a seller, we work for them and fully committed to them, and we want to see them make right decisions. That it's not just a question of going in, and you can see some situations when you look at the 3 Ds of death, divorce, and debt, that you're saying to someone, okay, somebody's just died, get the house up.
No.
Think about it. These are big decisions, and I think you are.
Well, I feel
honest.
very, very strongly with that. Over a period of time, and I think particularly the last 20 years, I saw so many contemporaries of my parents reaching a stage where one had died. I had one woman one day, and she sat at her kitchen table and said, I want to sell the house. And I said to her, you can sell the house. Her 5 adult children were away, and it wasn't the right decision. She hadn't thought about where she was going. She had great friends, she had great neighbours, she had a great network. And constantly I come back into the office and I say to everybody, I told them wait for 6 months or wait for a year. You're not always right. But I think, as Philip said, be honest with the clients. And we've had so many people that we've sold property again and again. We have a commercial property over on the street parallel to here. This will be the 5th time I've had the sale of it since
Is that the Butchers?
No, beside it.
Butchers,
It
very
was a school bookshop, and with the new department rules, unfortunately, the couple, have had to close. But I've sold that 5 times.
Yeah,
So, it's nice that people come back and talk to us. But I think Philip's whole point is, you go to the supermarket, mass.
Yeah.
For an hour like me, it's still a great source. Sunday.
it's refreshing to hear that, because
To discuss. Yesterday morning we discussed 3 or 4 different properties. Yes. So
you can hear it, particularly from younger agents. You can say, I have to win another bunch of clients next year, and win another bunch of clients next year, and they can be focused on the bottom line. Whereas property is a longer term play. You deliver that service, maybe you recommend they don't sell today, and our data says people sell between 7 and 12 years in Ireland. So if you're in it for the long game, you'll play that long game and that repeat business, and you guys are a really good example of how that comes back to kind of keep you guys in business as well.
Yeah.
Well, we would have had a farm recently which It was actually, my late mother tells the story, it was one of my first, it was the first land letting that my father did in the 50s. It was near Great Manor. And it took a whole day for this land letting, and everybody had to come in then to the kitchen. But I looked after it then for the son of the original owner, and he died 25 years ago, and I sold it. He had no family. I sold it for his nieces and nephews.
And you better put in the part then that we did a clearance sale
Oh yes.
of the furniture of this house.
That's a full service.
When I went to pick you up on innovation, when I tried to introduce innovation,
Sorry.
this was an absolute disaster. So,
Thank you for your honesty.
no, because I should have listened to my mother and my grandmother and Mary. So I thought, having seen how wonderful fine art auctioneers, you get a paddle number. So I gave everybody a number on the back of their catalogue, but I didn't take their name or number, or I didn't take their details. So we had accounts open for 1, 2, 3, 4, but we didn't have any names. So I was 16.
He was 16,
so,
and thankfully, his mother, his grandmother, and Mary knew everybody.
Do you know, that's absolutely brilliant though, because actually that's exactly what we need, the spirit of innovation coupled with the wisdom of experience.
Yes.
Yeah, that's so good.
He learned about furniture auctions the hard way. I mean, I used to stand on a chair, and that Philip couldn't understand. You actually were selling everything, including the chair you stood on. So they had to keep moving me around ladders. I used to end up on ladders. But we've just sold this house again for the couple, who they were one of the first to, in my view, leave Dublin, retire early, leave Dublin. So they've had 25 years, great life. They ran a bed and breakfast, but then they bought the house across the road, so now they're downsizing.
Oh, right, okay. And this was the very first sale your father did?
First land letting, but now it's come full, so it's full service.
But what's also very interesting about that, the purchasers of that property are from the county.
Yeah.
And we had that property. It was a fantastic period residence on 50 acres, river frontage, picture perfect. Had numerous overseas buyers in American, UK buyers. All, yes, loved it, all went home, and that's another thing, ghosting. They disappear. But the couple that you had with the county connections are now the private purchasers.
A week before Christmas, and the owner said to me, "It's Christmas." And I said, "Doesn't matter." And it all worked out. But they will use it as a holiday home with the ultimate plan of moving permanently. But that's an example. This is the third time around. Not that they keep it many years, but we do have, rolling clients.
But we still have to be on top, and as we were talking about earlier, to keep clients aware and engaged of our presence and what we do. And recently we've upgraded our website. I think what was quite interesting, as you say, your website is your home, Daft is a space that you rent, and we find a lot of sellers will actually approach us through our own website first, and that is a really important tool, and then
well, actually, I'm delighted that you have brought us into kind of the area of technology, because as you were speaking, straight away I was thinking the local links. I'm thinking, as an agent, do you maybe then have a bias if a number of home buyers are coming to you? Do you have a bias maybe for the local links, just because you think that they're the people who will likely convert and stay and actually be the right buyers for an area? But the other side of it is, it also had me thinking, the firm has such a rich history. Does that ever become maybe a milestone or like a millstone around your neck? Is it ever, trust is such an important part of this business, but only, obviously based on delivery. So having such a long history, does that make it more difficult then to adjust to maybe changing buyer and seller expectations in the current marketplace, particularly since COVID, and really digital expectations that consumers have?
There's a lot in that question. Going back to the first point, about having a bias, obviously we work for the seller. We need to achieve the optimum for the seller. And I think I heard in a previous podcast something about, there's the highest price being offered, but then there's the best offer.
Price. Yeah.
And that is something we do invest a lot of time in, and engaging as much as possible with buyers and going back to our sellers and letting them ultimately make the decision. And obviously, if you know that somebody has an investment in the area, that could be a lot better than someone who's offering a couple of thousand more 3 months into the purchase, could peel away and you have time dry. And in terms then of keeping up to date and keeping properties looking their best, obviously the platform of Daft is phenomenal for that. And I think one of the things that we try and strive for is, number one, very good photography and not deceptive photography. Engaging, we have a great photographer who works with us. Then also looking at any virtual viewings to facilitate those. And something that we discussed before we started, from a social media perspective, we are looking at from September starting some campaigns on different platforms, but we would have a little reluctance to dive in, and I think it was mentioned, there's a double-edged sword to that.
Yeah.
And having seen where properties are put into a platform and they're critiqued, whether it's interior, whether it's pricing, whether it's its location, but I think ultimately you're forgetting that's somebody's home. Be it their home now or be it their parents' home, and I think one has to be very mindful and respectful of that, and it's how best to portray that and have control over it, that if you do need to respond or you need to cut it, you can. So it's something, from our evolution, there's every channel from the telephone, the email, WhatsApp, Zoom, Teams. Every channel is open, but we are hugely respectful and mindful.
Yeah.
We see as well that social media is on the rise, and people are using it for all sorts. Now, we're one of the most visited websites in the country. After Google, Facebook, and YouTube, then it's Daft. But people don't come to us for cat videos. They don't come to troll online. They come to look at properties.
Yeah.
If they come to sell their properties, they come to buy their properties. So you're right in that it's a double-edged sword. I would push it even further and say it's difficult to measure its impact. Well, we all know it's potentially important. We just don't know, are the leads coming from there? Are your next instructions coming online? We think in broad strokes it helps with visibility, for sure. And building your brand awareness around the town, if it's geolocated. But outside of that, for me personally, I struggle to see the investment translating into new instructions and growth to our clients. So I'd like to hear what you guys have to think about that.
Well, first of all, can I just say, just because I know there'll be people listening in, and Philip, I'm so glad that you brought this up today, because actually I think your concerns would definitely be shared by other agents around the country who are very mindful that it's not their own brand they're putting forward, it's their client's property. Yeah. So I'd be very, very mindful of that. So I'm genuinely glad that you brought it up today. And I think I would maybe have a slightly different view than Emmet does on this, but broadly, I think the situation is social media is a tool that is used as a signpost.
Correct.
So it should never be your home online, because you don't own that space. And when I say you don't own that space, you don't control it. So there are conversations going on there that you cannot moderate and that you cannot have removed unless there is a very strong or compelling reason to have that removed. So actually one of the things, but I wouldn't like to see agents be scared of using social media, because actually it's a really powerful tool. And in fact, Daft also uses social media as a signpost, but smartly, to get people over to Daft. And that's how it should be used. It's only ever a signpost. I likened it to, it's the difference between if you throw a party in the local hotel or you throw a party in your home. You can't always get people thrown out the local hotel. You can definitely evict them from your home. And that's, but the one thing I would say, maybe that's slightly differs from what Emmet was saying, is that actually I do think that you can have, you're right, people go to Daft to buy. So it's not like people on Instagram who might also see something and they just happen to be in the market. So absolutely, it's a much more diluted audience for sure, and a less committed audience, absolutely. But actually, social media is very quantifiable compared to, say, something like running print ads.
Yeah, very much.
And don't get me wrong, actually, I think print ads are really important. I think for sale boards, and actually, only in very recent years, we've come back to the old-fashioned leaflet drop, which I never thought we would do. You know, I thought they were gone a decade ago.
Yes.
Yeah,
they are.
but it's really interesting because it definitely depends on the property. I've spoken to, I the luxury of speaking to estate agents all the time, and really what we're hearing is that different channels do different things. So Facebook, still very good for sellers because it's of a certain generation. And in fact, I just on the way down today, I asked our young intern that I've mentioned to check something on Facebook, and he was like, "What, Facebook?" He didn't have it on his phone. He just, the younger generation don't use that. So your next generation of buyers and sellers are not going to reach. You're not going to reach them through Facebook.
No.
But your current generation of sellers, you just might.
Yeah.
But what's interesting is that TikTok has huge reach, but we suspect a much more diluted audience. Instagram, but it's increasing, by the way, and is a much older audience than people think. But
Interesting, I heard that on one of your others, like over 35s. It's remarkable.
Yes.
So, but you see, these are not the people who are generating content; they're consuming content.
Correct.
But you only need people who are consuming content because you need to be the content creator. But actually, increasingly, we're still hearing that Instagram is a powerful one. In terms of Twitter, I think we've almost moved away from it altogether. It has lost its touch, and there's a particularly contentious one. So I think it's really important for estate agents to understand that it's not one size fits all when it comes to a campaign, that each channel reaches a different audience. So if you're trying to attract buyers, sellers, investors, very different. You know, they're really stuck into the hustle culture of YouTube. So YouTube Shorts is the way to get investors, short attention spans. So, so absolutely, but you need to be realistic in what you're doing.
Exactly, and I think you do need to be open to it as well. And it's there is a certain amount of trial and error to it. And I think from the development of a new website to piloting with our website developers, some of the social channels we will see. But everything, in terms of from looking at a new listing, we've got 4 this week. And it's targeting when we will put them up as well, because it's also quite interesting. You probably have more info, putting the property up on a Wednesday evening versus a Friday evening.
Yeah, well, Wednesday evening and Friday evenings are the most viewed time.
They are.
So, yeah.
Why Wednesday? That's interesting. I haven't heard that
It just
before.
seems like it's the hump. People are getting on with their week, and then they sit down on a Wednesday evening and think they've kind of overcome the week. Now, this is just my take on it.
They've passed the halfway stage.
Yeah, they're like,
they're
we can plan for the
right.
future. And then on a Friday evening, they're like, now I have a bit of downtime. And people like surfing property. They like thinking of their future. They like when agents like you present the properties really well and sell the dream to them. They're like, okay, this is where I want to be.
Well, I'm very conscious that we're running out of time today, but we still haven't, for anybody who's listening in that's actually considering potentially house hunting in the area, we haven't really covered maybe some of the sellers and the budgets that you're dealing with. So let's start with, can you tell us a little about 4 instructions you've taken this week?
So the 4 instructions, looking at them from a seller's perspective, 2 properties are coming to the families as an inheritance, so they're being offered to the market. In not too much TLC, but good 3-bed family homes that will either make a good starter home, could make a good move up for somebody coming from an apartment or a smaller unit. And then the other 2 are investments for investors. I think it's a recurring theme, exiting investors, and they are 2 apartments. So there's great value in them. The 3-bed semi and a 3-bed mid-terrace coming in at 180,000 each.
Wow,
and they're averaging about 90 square meters, very good decorative order. And then the apartments are coming in at about 125, and they are about 60 square meters.
They've been about 60 square meters, they're 2 beds.
And just because I know this has been a trend in other areas, do you tend to have, obviously you'll be listing the property, but do you tend to have a list of buyers that maybe
Yes.
have been unsuccessful on the
Yes.
bidders? Would you reach out to them
Engage,
first?
yes. So, and then that is, looking at that Wednesday or Friday to stagger, so you could start the conversation either the week before to give somebody, some preview in advance, and then have viewings lined up. So it is all about, building those relationships with, buyers as well as their sellers.
Yeah, I'm a huge advocate for technology, and I'm always looking at tools, and tools that can, manage all of this. But it's interesting in the marketplace we're in at the moment. We're hearing consistently that actually it is very much the relationship that maybe previously unsuccessful buyers have with the agent that moves them maybe to the top of the list, and they get the call that a property is coming.
Equally, and we went for the seller.
We have a really interesting stat, is that 50%, 48% of all of the leads we send you to buy a home from you are also selling a home. And 85% of them haven't appointed an agent yet. So when you're in that mindset and you're seeing 10 people show up to one of your beautiful homes, you could say 5 of these people have a home to sell, and the majority of them haven't appointed an agent yet. So when you start thinking like that, you can go and work for the seller, but you can also win the next instruction.
Sorry, Emma, can you repeat those stats?
So
I didn't realise
48% of every lead that Daft sends to an agent, a buyer lead, has also got a property to sell, and 85% of them have not appointed an agent yet. So the more leads you get in for a property, the better you present it, the better it's priced, the better the agent it's with. You get 10 people in the door, there's 5 instructions to win at every one of those viewings. And once you start thinking along those lines and start treating Daft as a business development tool and not just as an aid to your selling, then you start to be able to grow your business. Think about going out today to try and sell this property, but I'm going to win a couple of instructions on the way.
That's very interesting, and it is a journey for everybody. And I think that's from listening to Magella last week and talking about creating awareness for buyers, because I think you've got, when you say that's a large number, then some of those people who will then present, they may have no mortgage on their property, so in their mind they're a cash buyer. But we have to rewind and unpack and say, well, we need to get you sold or say agreed first before you can. But no, that is very interesting.
Yeah, so like everything we're doing in Daft now, and why we win, it's like why we win. It's written all over our offices. Get more leads to the agent. If we can get the agent more leads, then they'll value us more than our competition. And what we're seeing then is that we send X number more leads than our competitor, and then we analyse those leads. And almost half of those leads have a property to sell.
Well, we had a very good outcome. We listed a property with you Friday evening and had 15 viewing requests.
Well, there's 7
from
properties
Friday evening.
for sale there.
I think we should tell people it's only Monday, so that's from Friday to Monday.
Correct.
For rural Ireland,
Yes.
for little town
That is fantastic
Yeah.
outcome. A fantastic outcome. And now you start thinking along these lines, 15 people to view that property, 7 of those have a property to sell.
That's definitely going to change how I think about
They're all
things.
first time buyers.
Majority first time buyers.
bar 2,
Yes.
who have actually sold in Dublin.
Well, first time buyers.
But that's again interesting, that trend of people coming down. So I'm wondering, are they maybe potentially people who bought starter apartments with the expectation of trading up at some point?
No, the 2 that you have, say Dublin, they would be retiring,
semi-retiring, and selling a high-value property in Dublin with a view to buying an apartment in Dublin as a base, and then
A second home
down here.
Yes.
And do you know are the links to the area?
No, there's no links. But with one of them we had gone sale agreed on another property before, and one of the challenges that we face is that when you're driving back to Dublin from here, it is 2 hours, and for a lot of people that is just half an hour really too much.
It's that little bit too much.
Yeah.
Having said that, the improvements in the
roads,
bus service here in Iraq, we have Local Link, which serves the whole of the Hook Peninsula. It's a private bus service, and it's used regularly the whole way around the peninsula, Duncan and the Hook, and of course the bus air and service. We did have a train station.
It's now the
Unfortunately,
Greenway.
it is now our new greenway.
Yeah.
It opened last July, the first 5 kilometres, but what I think is going to be amazing, north of New Ross, the railway line is still there and it runs out to what's known as the Red Bridge, which is an old iron bridge, which you go under a tunnel and then come back in via the road into New Ross. So this is at the moment under construction, and when that's finished, coupled with the Dunbrody and the Norman Centre, which is planned for the old Bank of Ireland premises on the quay, we sold that 3 years ago to the local authority. That's planned for 2027 for opening, and that's done.
Yeah.
There'll be great.
There'll be a lot to see.
There will be. There will.
So well, that really lets us finish on quite a high note, because we wanted to, not just learn more about the business here and the agency here, but also to let people maybe who have yet to explore New Ross as a potential base. So I suppose the final thing maybe we'd like to hear is for anybody who has yet to come and start exploring New Ross as a potential base, if they are looking to relocate, what would be the most important things they need to know?
It's a great place to live, quite simply, in terms of quality of life, in terms of the offering, and if we look at it from a property perspective, value, and location.
And you didn't even mention the sunshine.
Thank you.
Sun is still shining, Carol. Thank
I would
you.
expect nothing less. That's all we have time for today. Thank you so much to you both for allowing us into the office, especially when you just had such an important celebration, celebrating 100 years, not in this particular building, but of the brand, and it's such a huge achievement. So well done to all of the team. And again, thank you for allowing us down today, and thank you to my co-host Emmet Creighton, Client Partnership Director with Daft.ie, as Emmet reminded us, Ireland's most visited property website. Finally, my thanks to producer Katie Tallon and her assistant, our intern Ben, for today, and to the production team at Hear Me Roar Media. We'll catch you on the next episode of the Property Roundup here on iPropertyRadio.com.